Have you ever felt stuck in the middle? Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm talking about blended family. So today on the Father Show, we're going to be talking about blending families and how that works. And we got an expert with us today to tell us exactly how to do it. So stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Father Show, and I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you joined us today. Today, we're going to be talking about blended families, and so many times we, as men, we get into a relationship, and we feel like we're stuck in the middle because we have our former wife over here, and we have our current girlfriend or wife over here, and you're trying to keep everything together and everybody happy and blended and so you can be happy. So we got a young lady here today by the name of Judy Graybill, and she's an international relationship expert and a certified stepfamily coach, and she helps couples to work through challenges as a team so that they can experience a stronger social spousal relationship, harmony, and deep emotional intimacy. Man, my tongue is tired today. But she has helped clients across 5 continents, and she is also a speaker, a consultant, and an author of an upcoming book, Journey to Love. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Judy Graybill. Hey, Judy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Mike, for having me. I appreciate being here. And hello to all the listeners.
Oh, well, we're glad to have you. You know, we've been talking, about blended family, and I know personally how hard it is to blend a family. And it is something that you hear a lot of women talking about, and they are, one, they're so protective of the kids, so they're really protected of being a blended family. But fathers, we have a burden on trying to blend the family together, because he may have kids along with his new spouse or girlfriend having kids, and you got to try to blend them together, and hopefully everybody gets along, which normally does not happen, but but it's an ideal situation. And one thing comes to mind, on this show we've talked about co-parenting, and if you ever wish that you could co-parent with your former spouse, this is the time. Because when you're talking about a blended family, man, if you and your former spouse can get along, that's going to take a lot of burden off of you. So I know co-parenting is one thing that is huge, and we should try to do that as much as we can. So let me ask you, what is the definition of a blended family?
Ooh, the definition, if any, well, basically a single parent who joins another single, and only one adult has to have children from a previous relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, any single parent who then gets into another relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
that's that's basically it, because the step family dynamics actually start in the dating stage before they even move in together.
Yeah.
And so the word blended family, um, there are some colleagues in my profession, some step family professionals who don't really like the word blended because blended implies that it all becomes one. Like I compare it to like a shake, like a milkshake, where
Yeah.
you blend all the ingredients together and it comes out tasting like one flavor and it tastes really good.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's more, I prefer the term step family simply or remarried with children simply because it's step families are more like a quilt, in my opinion. So
Okay.
when you have like a quilt, you take all these little different pieces of fabric and you sew them all together. And I'm sorry, maybe your audience doesn't do that. Men probably are not into making quilts, but just, for the analogy, it's it's more like that though. I mean, it's like because the finished product is still complete and is still beautiful, but each individual part of it is still individual and unique. And then
Yeah.
you fit together in a very synergistic sort of way. And so that's how I like to look at the it's not the way it happens most of the time, but when you opened it with the ideal of that, and that's my ideal of what a blended family should look like, the definition, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And I agree to some point. I don't, me personally, like I'm in the blended uh, family now, and I don't really say blended. I just say my family, and or I think you mentioned, bringing kids together, and I can't remember what you said now, but you know, I don't put step kids in front of it because they're really and a lot of it does depends on the age, but step kids are, they're young, they're like your own kids. There's no really step kids because you, as a father, if you're being a true man, you're taking care of them just like they were your own. So to say step, no, I just say in my family, I just say my kids, and even
Yeah,
some.
that's very common. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I did I interrupt you?
No, no, no. Go ahead.
It's just you bring up so many points with what you just said. Because first of all, that is the ideal to treat all the kids just like your own, and that's what we want. That is the ideal, and so that's great. I but in some families that's not going to work, and the reason why is because it really evolves around whether the children want you to be their natural father or not. And you mentioned the age, and the age is a
Mm-hmm.
huge um, thing because the younger the kids, the easier it is. They're just going
Yeah.
to adopt. This is my dad. They're not going like 6 or younger. They're going to think of you. This is my dad. Period.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going
Mm-hmm.
to think this is my stepdad. But when you get into the older kids, when you're blending at like the teenage level, I want to 6 is like a rule of thumb, but then it's like you get to they may say stepdad or they may call you by your first name as opposed to dad. So then it gets a little bit iffier, and the dynamics come in on whether they want a dad or not. If the kids don't want a dad, it doesn't matter how you treat them. Tr- Chaos is going to ensue. And that's actually part of the problem. And that's part of the reason why um, fathers do feel a lot of pressure because if you're blending with a woman who wants you to be that dad to their kids, then but the kids don't want you to, um, that's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And that was one of my questions I was going to ask you, and I think you already hit it. Is why does so many blended families, which is so common, I think is actually the majority in families units today, but why do so many of them fail?
Right. And so there's so many different factors that come into to play here. And one is the relationship that the kids have with the other parent. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, like you talk about co-parenting with your other experts, and I think, by the way, your other experts that you had talking about co-parenting, I think they did a fabulous job. I just want to say that because I listened to them. Um, but the reason why co-parenting with the ex-spouse is so important and getting along is because if you're not getting along with the ex-spouse, chances are that your ex-spouse is not going to want, or they're not going to accept the new wife. and
Yeah.
and that's actually part of the reason why dads get into the middle, is
Mm-hmm.
because if your former wife is bad mouthing your current wife is going to give you a lot of pressure to to do something, say something, fix it, so to speak. But what also happens is if your former wife is not accepting your current wife, they're also going to badmouth your current wife to the kids.
Right.
So then the kids are going to hear that, and they're going to just start disrespecting your current wife. And so I want to make a distinct. It makes a difference on whether you're a stepdad or a biological dad, if you have kids of your own or you don't, because all kind of has like some factors into it also. But
Absolutely.
in general, this is part of like what happens. Um, so when this is how the turmoil happens, is like the kids are hearing bad things from maybe their mom, and they're taking it home, and they're taking it out on your current wife, or they're
Mm-hmm.
acting up behaviorally. And then um, so it just becomes difficult to navigate. And then if you try to um, discipline, they might be uh, not wanting to do the discipline. They're not going to listen.
Yeah.
So then it becomes even more difficult. So then what happens is you have a scenario where the kids are just like in anarchy, and they're rebelling, and you have um, a stepdad on the other, on one hand, is going to be they might be wanting to discipline even more because that's what they learned. So
Mm-hmm.
like when the kids are acting up, I'm just going to instill more rules, more rules, more rules, because that's the tendency. uh, but and the wife is like, yeah, that's what I want, because I need order in the house. But it's
Yeah.
actually counterintuitive, because that's not why the kids are rebelling in the first place. You have to understand the underlying reasons for the kids rebelling,
Mm-hmm.
and more restrictions is going to just make them rebel even more. And so then there's like there's some families who are just wanting them to make the kids happy. I have to listen to the kids. If they're happy, we're going to be happy. So then a lot of biological parents are then backing off on the discipline that the step parents are trying to create. And that that's when more eruptions take place, because now the biological parent has undermined the authority of the step parent. Do you see how this happens? And then so now you just have more anarchy, more rebellion, and you have a lot of people who are not understanding the real issues and why everybody is arguing in the first place.
Well, yeah, and I think the fact that you know in any situation and any relationship, communication is so important. And for we know, you and and I'm sure some other professionals out there know that the kids can break up a marriage just so easy, and because they know what they're doing, they know how they're manipulating one off of the other. So the two parents, and sometimes in these cases when you're talking about blended family, really the three parents, if they're not all together, the former spouse, the new spouse, and the husband, if they're not all together on one page, the kids can run amok. Wouldn't you say?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, you touched on a lot of really key issues there with so much. Um, the manipulation, and that's part of something that a lot of biological parents do not want to accept about their kids. A lot of biological parents won't see it. So you have a step parent coming in, whether it's a stepmom or a stepdad, and we'll talk about the stepdads in this case since that's your audience. um, they're a step parent is going to see it easier. So then, if a step parent, a stepdad, is coming in and they're trying to, they're saying like, "Look, hon, to their wife, you're sorry, but Joe is trying to manipulate you." So, and she's like, "Oh, maybe." And so, like the mom is like, she just doesn't want to accept it. So a step parent, a stepdad's hands are going to be tied if a mom does not want to admit that the kids are manipulating. So that's really important. You have to be honest. You have to look at the behavior. And so
And don't say not my
I want to
baby.
right, right. Um so and then like biological fathers on the other hand, they tend to be a little bit more realistic. They'll actually see it. And one of the things I want to impart to your audience is that um, fathers actually have the most in natural influence. It like the biological parent always does. So if you're a biological dad that does not have I mean, you're a biological dad, and your kids are uh, acting up, but and maybe you're wanting your stepmom to actually be more, your current wife to be more involved with the kids. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously you want to have a big happy family. You can't figure out, one of the things I see a lot is that um, the relationship between the kids and the stepmom breaks down. So if the biological father, is willing to see the manipulation and they're not going to allow it,
Hmm.
i.e., have healthy boundaries, then it allows for a relationship to happen between the kids and the stepmom.
Now, do
But
you? I was just going to ask you: is there a time frame when a parent or the step parent in this case, let's just put it that way so we can easily identify it, should start being more disciplinary, more forceful, um, you know,
yeah, that's a
being.
really good question as far as the time frame, because it really depends on how well the two parents are understanding all the step family dynamics. How you
Mhm.
mentioned communication, that's really vital. And one of the problems with communication is really understanding each other. So like when a stepmom, for example, has when they have an issue with something that the kids have done and they mention it to the father, the first action is for biological father, and moms do this too because it's that biological, is to defend their kids. So there's that misunderstanding that happens. So like they automatically think that the stepmom is misunderstanding the intention of the kids. And it's not that she's misunderstanding, but there is misunderstanding happening. There's a lot of misunderstanding happening. They don't understand um, the step family dynamics, and and without there are so many step family dynamics to talk about. So I don't feel like it's would be the most beneficial to actually talk about all of those dynamics. But I will say that as far as the timing is concerned, it depends on how well you are understanding each other, how well you are on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
If so, initially the biological parent has to instill all those rules,
Mm-hmm.
and over time, what has to happen is that the kids have to develop a relationship with the stepmom,
Right. Eh,
and only after the kids develop that natural relationship with the stepmom will they be willing to listen to her,
and wouldn't
because
you?
the stepmom does not have natural influence like the
Mm-hmm.
father does.
Right.
The father has a natural influence with both the kids and the ex-wife. So the biological father actually has the most influence and the most direct power, if you will, or control over the situation, whereas the mother doesn't. So the father actually has to foster that relationship between the kids and the stepmom. So
Right.
only after that relationship between the kids and the stepmom is developed, it will develop naturally over time, but it's going to look different because it depends on how everybody navigates those dynamics and communicates and all those other things.
Yeah.
Um, it that could take only a couple months, or it could take years. I
Right.
mean, the statistic is 7 to 10 years in order for a step family to feel like a cohesive family,
Oh, really?
where they're not feeling like the step, where they can just say it's a family as opposed to step. Um, but that has to develop over time. And what I say to clients is that you'll know when the kids start saying, "Wow, mom," or call her by her name to the stepmom, "That was a great idea."
Mm-hmm.
Or they'll start mimicking what the stepmom does. They'll start mimicking what the step parent does. When they start, so that's when you know that the kids are developing that relationship. That's the influence. So you really want to look for that influence. And we know that we can't change other people, but I really like to express the influence aspect because I think people miss that. They forget there's a thing called influence. And influence is subtle. It's not about changing the other person. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about forcing the change on other people. It's actually about allowing it to develop over time, and the relationship comes first, and
Yeah.
then the influence happens naturally.
Yeah. And
Does
you
that make
have to
sense?
build a relationship with that child before you start disciplining or and this works on both ends, whether you the
Yes.
stepfather or the stepmother. You can't just walk in and say, okay, everything's going to run the way I say it's going to run. This is my house and this is how we do it. You have to be able to open up your arms and your heart and let
Yes,
that.
and it's hard, it's easier said than done, because
Oh,
like what you said
absolutely.
in the beginning, it's like you want them to, you're going to treat your stepkids the way you would treat your own kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not ready for that, then that's going to backfire. So, I mean,
But what if you would, if you are a stepfather and you're going into a relationship and you haven't had any kids? So now all of a sudden you are married and you have two, three, four kids, whatever, and you haven't had any. How would you suggest the father, start taking on that issue?
right. So, a stepdad who does not have his own children coming into that marriage, um, they have a much harder time of it. And part of that, again, the communication with the current wife is really, really important, because expectations come into play. What are you have to have realistic expectations,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes your wife is going to put unrealistic expectations on you.
Mm-hmm.
So the best way to come in um, is to instead of trying to be a disciplinarian, it's better to try to be a role model. So
Excellent.
just it is really about keeping your side of the street clean, and it is about um, your personal integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're just being a good influence overall, whether you're just trying to listen, you're just trying, you're, I think listening, that's probably really key. What is the child really asking for? What are they really
Yeah.
wanting? Really listening to with the intent of understanding what your partner wants. I think there there's really a necessity to really understand step family dynamics.
Yeah.
There's a psychology behind that. I got certified through the Step Family Foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and what I realized is that in my situation, the reason why I became a certified step family coach and the reason I'm so passionate is from my failed step family experience, which was really dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned is that we really sabotaged ourselves unintentionally based off of these unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
So it's really about understanding the deeper emotional issues that everybody has and really
Yeah.
understanding
And I
that,
think as a
and it takes a lot of work.
yeah, and I think as a father, we should be, if we are the stepfather, and you know, you shouldn't force your feelings on the child, or you force that child, or make the child feel like it's being forced into this relationship. You would you say that they need to let the child, in a
Right, so
sense,
what
come to them?
happens, right, so what happens is what happens very very often with that is they have that intention. But then when the kids start doing things that the step parent thinks is not good, is not healthy, like they get really, really concerned about the emotional development of the children. They
Mm-hmm.
get really, really concerned about where this is leading. And so there's a lot of things that play into that. Like it could be like the ex spouse is a big one. So one of the really, really common scenarios is that um, as a dad, it's the ex-wife that is the bad influence.
Mm-hmm.
As a biological dad, that's one of their main concerns. As the stepdad, it could be the biological dad that is the
Mm-hmm.
bad influence. So, and we all want our kids to have an equal relationship with both parents. But the harsh reality is that's not always feasible. Like
Yeah.
if it's a very unhealthy situation, I mean, there is a divorce for and in some co-parenting situations, the reason the co-parenting does not go smoothly is because they tried and failed over and over and over again. And we can
Mm-hmm.
talk to our blue in the face about influence and being a great role model. And if I just do what is right, that other person is going to snap out of it and suddenly start, doing the right thing. But they don't. And so the hard part, the rub with the step parent is that they get really, really concerned. It's hard to step back and just watch them doing these things
Yeah.
that you feel is really a detriment to their development, where you feel it's really not going in the right direction, and disciplining is not helping, because as a step parent, you're not supposed to discipline, and that's the mom's. And even if you did try to discipline, the kids are going to reject it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's when that stepdads really start feeling stuck, is because it's like I'm really really concerned, like
Yeah.
they really it's from a place of compassion, but how it's received by their partner is, you just don't understand my kids.
Yeah.
You just don't understand what's going on. And then they start, because moms will start feeling like defensive, like you're attacking their parenthood. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, they'll feel like you're attacking the way, like, are you saying I'm a bad mom? And dads will do that too.
Mm-hmm.
They'll think, oh, and that's like the worst thing you could do. It's like, no, because in the communication, you didn't once say anything about their parenting skills. You're talking about the kid. You're talking about their development. You're talking about the ex's influence. You never mentioned anything about, the parenting skills of your partner, but that's how they receive it. That's how they hear it.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why they feel so stuck. So, like, what I want to say with the biological parents, uh, biological dads, is really to feel optimistic with the action taking. And I know I just said all that emotional crap about all the things that could go wrong, and then I say be optimistic. Um, but what I mean is, like, when you're looking at the bigger picture, when you well, let me say this. You want to be a stronger positive influence than the negative influence of the ex, or the a stronger positive influence than the negative influence of whether it's their friends, the ex, or the other parent. Do you know what I mean? So, like,
Yeah.
if you're looking at that as the bigger picture, then it's really just becomes about healthy boundaries, keeping your side of the street clean, and being a role model. And sometimes it means they have to learn the lessons the hard way. Uh,
Okay.
there's
Well,
so many different things I could say on this.
yeah. Well, let me ask you this. And what would you tell two fathers, the biological father and the stepfather? How would you suggest that they come together so that they can have the best interest of the child and work together to make sure the child is living the best life that it can? Do you have any suggestion for men on that?
Um, yeah, well, choose your battles wisely. You know, that's a huge thing. There's it is a uh when I say choose your battles wisely, I mean there's a difference between um drowning, be protecting yourself, having healthy boundaries, defending yourself, versus um being aggressive. So you want to be more diplomatic as opposed to aggressive. You're not trying to change anybody. You don't want to push getting along. You do want to try to think, ask yourself, what is the highest good for all involved? If you look at it that way, sometimes you have to swallow your pride. Pride is a very, very good thing, but it's it can have that opposite effect if you're
Right.
going to be in arrogance, if you're going to be
Right.
self-righteous about what the other person is doing wrong.
Yeah.
Do you know? So
S-
I would say, uh, sometimes swallow your pride, but don't be a doormat.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. But Judy, I want to thank you for being on the show and providing your expertise in this. So let our audience know how they can get a hold of you.
Okay, well, the best way to get a hold of me is on Facebook. I have two pages. My first page is Judy Graybill, or at Judy M. Graybill. It says Journey to Real Love on the cover photo. My second page is Stepfamily Coach. I'm also on Instagram as judy.m.graybill. I'm on LinkedIn as Judy Graybill. And my website is judygraybill.com, which is on the banner of the bottom of your screen.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I want to make sure that, these folks can get a hold of you. So don't go away, but so stay on the line. I'm going to talk to you in a little bit. But, ladies and gentlemen, that's our show for today. And I want to thank you for joining us. We had Judy Graybill, and she provided some great information on, being stuck in the middle as a blended family. And in this society today, most families are blended. So we know it's a problem. And we know that so many people have uh, problems getting their kids along. I know I did when uh, my daughter was younger. So I've been through it and I understand it. But if you need additional information and additional resources, I want you to go to the Father Show Resource Program website, and you're going to go to the Father Show with MikeThompson.com and just go up to resources, and you will find a list of resources in your state. And you can also find Judy, and you can, give her a call because she can work all over the place, and she's been in 5 continents. She doesn't have to be in your state, but you can get a hold of her and talk to her. So don't forget, subscribe before you leave, and if you like it, click on the like button and let us know, and also feel free to share it. But I also want you to leave the comments in the bottom. If you have some show that you would like for us to do, please let us know. If you would like to comment on this show, let us know as well. We'll love to have all your comments so we'll know what we're doing is working for you. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's our show for today. We'll love to see you again next week. In the meantime, God bless.